Welcome, my dear friends. It's great to see you again. I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an appreciator of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. In this episode, we're continuing analyzing the writings of an interesting person, Gary Gygax, creator of Dungeons & Dragons, by completing Chapter 5 of his book, Role-Playing Mastery. And as we explored in Part 1 of Chapter 5, this is about rules, construction and reconstruction. How you set up your game helps shape what the game is about and what you can do with it. And how the writer's intention for what the game should be about should be reflected in the rules, because that facilitates everything that you're going to do in the game, both as the game master and the people doing the playing. And so this episode we pick up with defining parameters of play. One more topic pertaining to rules must be dealt with before moving on to other subjects. Rules define the parameters of play, what actions can and cannot be taken, how play proceeds, what aims are set forth, and what goals are stated. Knowing the boundaries, so to speak, of the game world gives the participant the laws of the milieu, its systems of action, and all else that is set forth to bring the game into being as a shadow of actual life. The more intense the shadow, the more entertaining the game. The rules, however, must never clutter the game reality. Think of trying to live in real life while constantly having to call to mind the physical laws of the universe. Then add in the secular laws and the religious ones as well. Some RPG systems do this in an attempt to be realistic. The parameters of the game delineate for the reader of the rules just what is possible. Therefore, the reader must compare what is written and implied with what he expects from the game. One does not study accounting to become a surgeon. In the same way that the mesh between expectation and provision is taken care of, the parameters of the game rules also inform the astute participant just what is allowed in the game system. It is foolish to devote a great deal of effort to mastering a particular RPG and then to attempt to move outside the parameters while attempting to maintain the system. The complexities of a well-designed role-playing game are such that there is a balance that must be kept. Attempting to disrupt the balance while maintaining use of the system is an effort not dissimilar to attempting to graft wings onto pigs to enable them to fly. Well, that's an example. For instance, if the participant desires to play the game with the persona who engages in modern methods of crime detection, the basis for gaming should not be a system that does not feature this activity. In their desire to control, not master, the play of an RPG, some enthusiastic participants devise improvements. These alterations of the parameters of the system are usually aimed at producing a particular result, allowing the improver's game persona to become the most powerful one within the particular campaign. In addition to accomplishing nothing in the way of making the person an expert in the field, such tinkering tends to destroy game campaigns, or even whole game systems, if a sufficient number of participants give credence to the merits of the supposed improvement. Instead of taking this approach, the one seeking mastery understands the limits of the game system and intelligently utilizes them during participation. The rules define what can and cannot be done with regard to specific and general areas. The spirit draws in the remainder of the boundaries. For, as is well understood, the best of RPG rules cannot hope to cover all of what must go into a game that reflects make-believe or actual life. At the risk of belaboring the point, here's an example. No thinking participant would seek to create a game persona who was a liberal, pacifist, nonviolent crusader for world harmony in a system based on survival after a worldwide Holocaust. Would they not? Hasbro thinks so. Yet, to a lesser degree, this frequently occurs in RPG campaigns. Game masters beware. Once you have in mind the parameters of play, just about anything that adheres to the spirit of the game is permissible. In fact, the master participant will excel in understanding and utilizing the intent of the game. Thus, true expertise will shine forth. Knowing the limitations imposed by the rules and implied by the spirit of the work does not place undue limitations on creativity and imagination. As has been pointed out, no set of rules, no matter how voluminous, can possibly define more than a fraction of the possibilities inherent in the intelligent pursuit of a well-designed game system. The author of such a work desires this, for the participants must have ample room for personalizing the game campaign through imaginative and individual creativity within the boundaries of the work. Minor variances from rules or solidification of vague guidelines are but a small portion of activity within the parameters. The master of the role-playing game creates cultures, political systems, societies, secret groups, strange inventions, new races, or whatever else gives greater depth and breadth to the campaign. Players innovate approaches to solving the problems, dealing with the conflicts, or defining their roles within the system offered by the game. Solomon said that there was nothing new under the sun. Role-playing games are simply a recombining of existing elements to form a new compound heretofore unknown. By understanding the parameters of the game, actual and implied, the master gamer has the wherewithal to recombine the elements of the system to create compounds that conform to the milieu he has chosen to operate within. Remodeling the rules. So it is possible for the members of each playing group, principally the GM, but the players also have input, to remodel their game, adding accessories of both a functional and a decorative nature to the framework given by the rules. The use of the word remodel is intentional, for the process has much in common with the construction and reconstruction of a house or other sort of building. All such structures have common components: walls, floors, ceiling, roof. But the variations on the basic theme are almost as numerous as the people who design and execute the variations. In building or changing your house to make it the way you want it, you have latitude in determining where the windows and doors will go. Perhaps you want this section slightly elevated over that other section. What room will visitors first see when they enter the house from the outside? What paths can they take to get from one room to another? Decisions and answers such as these are within your purview because you are the one who is building the house and the one who should enjoy living in it when it is finished. So it is within the design of a role-playing game campaign. The Game Master's house may look much like the same as another GM's from the outside if both are based on the same framework, rules. But if a visitor peeks inside the front door of each place, he may find two remarkably different approaches to interior decoration. It is possible that after living in one house for a time, the GM and his family, the player group, may decide to move into a house of a different style. This sort of change can be refreshing, even exhilarating, but it is usually not without its drawbacks. Some of the furniture you had in your first house may have to be replaced because it doesn't fit the style of the new home, or because it's too large or too small. Perhaps the new house has fewer electrical outlets than the old one had, so you must either reconcile yourself to that fact or else do some rewiring. But be careful not to blow the fuse. That's written as though I think he experienced this. And since Ernie told us about electrical work on appliances, this probably did happen. Domiciles can be rebuilt and drastically changed in the process. If the project is undertaken with forethought, the result may be a comfortable home that retains the best features of the original home and augments them with personalized improvements. But if this methodology is taken to the extreme, the result may be not only uncomfortable, but downright dangerous. Imagine remodeling a home so that it is part log cabin and part split-level ranch, with a dash of A-frame and a dollop of adobe hut thrown in for good measure. Ew. The structure would look strange, perhaps even silly from both inside and outside. And it might just be structurally unsound, so that one day the whole thing comes crashing down. No one desires a house like this, yet some RPG enthusiasts have actually attempted to create and play within campaigns that are constructed in much the same fashion. The GM is obliged to consider the desires of the player. He must influence and direct these wants and needs to a great extent, but he must also be responsive. In addition to creative addition, modification, and special interpretation, the masterful game master will know if a change in the game system is called for, when it is needed, and how to accomplish the change. Before that need occurs, the campaign certainly will have evolved to a sophisticated state. The milieu will be well developed and will cover those areas in which the players have evidenced the most interest. This could be detailed topographical maps, cultural and social data of complex and/or unusual nature, highly detailed urban maps with information on government, politics, and population, state armed forces and warfare between rival powers, webs of hidden influence and secret power groups, and so forth. These and other special distinctions might appear singly or in combination. The existence of this sort of special information marks a mature and superior campaign. Just as special features of the campaign milieu will have come to the fore, so too will the systems to handle play reflect the group's personality and preferences. The campaign might feature complex methods of combat and detailed methods for conducting such combat. Different methods of problem solving might be offered to the players through creation of new character classes or skills and abilities. Scenarios devised might require solving exceptionally difficult mental problems or entail elaborate role-playing. Time or probability travel might be introduced to mixed genres and require players to operate their game personas in wildly differing historical periods or situations as diverse as fantasy and science fiction. The former a magic-dominated genre, the latter dominated by advanced science and technology. In all cases, the game master will have developed the special features of the campaign and play within the campaign through interaction with and approval of the group. If such variations remove the group from the realm of other participants utilizing the same game system, this removal will be done by choice, not by chance. A game master of the expert sort will advise the group that following a certain line will lead them into a game campaign form that will not be compatible with the campaigns of other groups. The masterful GM will know how to mitigate this incompatibility so as to enable the group still to have normal contact and communication with other enthusiasts and not become an isolated or fringe element within the gaming community. There are, of course, game systems that enjoy only very limited acceptance by the general community of RPG enthusiasts. This does not make such games bad or worthless. The small audience may indicate that the game system itself appeals only to some special interest group, or that the system has its basis in a genre that is not interesting to large numbers of people. It could be that the game is so complex and so demanding that only a few individuals are able to understand and appreciate it. Whatever the reason, games with limited audiences are already in isolated circumstances with respect to each group that plays the game in question. And thus, any significant alteration of the system will take the innovative group out of the mainstream. This must be a major consideration of game master and players before alterations of the campaign are made. There are also homegrown, very obscure rule systems that are pursued by a single group or by a handful of groups only. The game masters of such groups must display a rare sort of mastery indeed to bring their game choice into acceptance and their group into a position from which it can communicate with the general audience for role-playing game activity. Isolation tends to lead to entropy and attendant demise of RPG activity. Although there are millions of RPG enthusiasts in North America, the total still does not exceed 2% of the whole population at this time when he wrote it. Game masters and players alike need to be encouraging the pursuit and working collectively to ensure that the field grows and improves. The best of game masters perceive and support this view. The mature campaign will sooner or later reach a state at which it is evident either that the group is eminently happy as it is and willing to continue thus for an indefinite time, or else that it has become sated and desires something different. The first phenomenon is easy enough to deal with. There are no new tricks to learn, only solid performance is necessary. The game master can certainly pat himself on the back if the players ask for nothing but more of the same. It is solid evidence of the mastery of the GM, if only in regard to the group. It is not to be treated as a small accomplishment. But what about the other case? What is to be done when the players are restless? If you, as GM, have done virtually everything right, then it is a sign that the group, you included, needs a change of milieu, campaign, or game system. Perhaps alternating milieus with inclusion of the same PCs within each, and the variance of GMing brought thereby will make the group satisfied. If not, perhaps you or one of the players should set to work creating a new campaign world to wipe out past errors and bring into play all the new approaches used in the old milieu that were discussed as being desirable for a fresh start. There is also the possibility of moving the campaign, or a newly created one, into a new game system. Such a step is not a last resort, but it is a big decision to make. When this decision is made, it must be with full knowledge and consent of the entire group, or a large majority at least. The GM's responsibility to respond to the needs of the whole group encompasses players and game master alike. Change of game system is a step that should be made only with consideration and planning. Because of the effort entailed in taking the campaign into a new game system, the change will not be easily reversed if the results are not as desirable from up close as they were when seen from a distance. The decision should be contemplated for a reasonable period of time. The results of the change should be anticipated and understood as much as possible beforehand. Although the game master must bear the brunt of the work in the transition, the player group will also have to change its characters and contribute to the new campaign. The players must therefore have time to consider and provide input to the whole effort as it begins and continues. My own fantasy campaign has been changed 3 times. Once the Greyhawk campaign went from D&D to AD&D game rules. Then it was altered from a single GM campaign to a dual GM setup, in which another person assumed GM duties when I was unable to participate. Finally, it was redeveloped to enable the management of diverse player groups over a long period of time and at erratic intervals, while still allowing those members of the core player group to continue their various PCs within the whole. My reduced time for game mastering forced some of these changes, but time and change were also factors, for the campaign was initiated in 1973 and is still reasonably active to date. The last alteration, that of no longer aiming the campaign at a single player group, was forced by a set of altered personal circumstances that included relocation of some participants, resultant radical changes in the core group, and severe time restrictions. While some of the original group members moved to other campaigns and one or two have developed their own campaigns, most have not been actively involved in RPG activities since the last alteration of my campaign because there is no home for them, no campaign to operate in. This brings us to the point of changing the campaign. There are several ways to do it, and the change can be radical, gradual, or moderate. A radical change is the total abolition of the existing campaign and its basis. Let us use as an example an espionage game campaign that is ended and replaced by a science fantasy one. There will be disruption and some player loss, but if the changeover is the general desire of the GM and players, then the action is certainly justifiable. If you, as GM, determine that there is desire to make a radical change, and you are among the group wishing to alter the campaign genre so radically, then the move should be made as quickly and completely as possible. Gradual alteration of the campaign can entail any of several approaches. The change can be from one system in the same genre to another. Such an alteration usually would be made by the gradual substitution of key rules, each substitution being made sequentially so as to facilitate learning the new game's methods and the system's mechanics. Gradual alteration often occurs through the creation of special rules developed by the group. The only drawback is that the group then becomes singular and isolated in most cases. Another method of gradual alteration is to introduce one or more other genres to the campaign, with special rules for modification of PCs and whatever other elements of the base game rule system, as are no longer applicable to the new genre scenario used in the sessions that involve such play. For example, some playing groups have experimented with gradually introducing aspects of the science fantasy genre, typified by the Gamma World game, into a medieval fantasy campaign based on the AD&D game. It is certainly possible to have an enjoyable and satisfying experience through this sort of hybridization. However, such a method of gradual alteration is difficult for the GM, for he must know several other game systems and prepare the new rules. It is also demanding for the players, for they must handle a diversity of new assumptions over a relatively short period of gameplay. Although the learning curve is steep, the benefits can be manifold. An approach like this, if it systematically uses samplings of several genres, can yield information that is valuable in determining the new direction that the playing group will ultimately take. The player group is allowed to experience play in other genres, and from each of these experiences, the members can determine if they would actually enjoy long-term play in a campaign of that nature. The game master is likewise exposed to the needs of a campaign in each of the genres used and can make judgments as to his ability to manage each. In addition, all participants are broadened and given experience that will certainly make them better role-playing gamers. A campaign that features shifting genres is likely to be superior if the effort is pulled off successfully. But the demands upon the GM are so great that most would be unable to cope with them on an ongoing basis. Also, players would find much the same problem. Those who could manage the whole would be likely to find themselves as a group of proverbial jack-of-all-trades, masters of none. Very skilled participants, though, would certainly enjoy such a campaign, and all would develop greater skills than are normally seen within even masterful groups of the single genre sort. Moderate alteration of the campaign is easy and painless, but can be very damaging if it is not done correctly. This is due to the nature of the alterations and the singularity of the resulting campaigns. The alterations brought into play might actually make the campaign expression of the original base game a superior vehicle. That is, the game that was initially used to structure the campaign areas actually needs improvement, and the alterations are a means to this end. This is as opposed to areas in which current vogue, a fad or some aberration of the playgroup, is quantified through inclusion of special rules. Regardless of the merits of the moderate alterations imposed, they are very likely to cause the campaign to be singular, a none such. No other groups, or at best a handful of others, will be using the same rules. The participants in such an altered campaign are isolated from the gaming community at large, and this dooms their group to eventual extinction. Only if the alteration is used in a reasonably large segment of the participants utilizing the same genres is there hope. Combination of two games in the same genre, for instance, might produce a new sort of game entity that is superior to either of the other two alone. The publishers of the two games used will resist such combination, of course, and it will be difficult, if not impossible, to bring the resulting improvement to the attention of the majority of participants in the two separate systems. Frustrations of the sort that prompt people to alter games and campaigns sometimes cause individuals, usually game masters, to create new game systems. Marketing such new games is difficult and requires a lot of time and money. At best, such efforts bring into being small followings whose continued existence as playing groups hangs by a thread. If the basement publisher that produced the game goes out of business, the game will not spread much further, if at all. and the source of new ideas and accessory material will dry up at the same time, since presumably the publisher of the game was the only individual interested in propagating and refining a system. Until and unless some means of increasing the size of the audience for a new RPG is actively pursued and additional vehicles for information and product dissemination are provided, the vast majority of these well-intentioned creative efforts are foredoomed to failure. Foredoomed to failure. Small following RPGs are essentially isolated. They gradually stagnate or are brought down abruptly because game publication ceases, and the remnants slowly wither and fade into nothingness. To put it another way, nothing succeeds like success. The most popular game systems are popular for a reason. They appeal to more people. They offer a greater degree of enjoyment to a broader participant base. This means that players will be easier to bring into campaigns. Just as important, it also means that the publisher of the game system will support the game and its game masters and players by publishing new information and playing material on a regular basis. All that assures fertile ground in which the campaign can flourish. It is a hard fact that the good game master cannot afford to ignore. This does not mean that this work advocates basing campaigns on only those games that are popular. To put it bluntly, I of all people would never do so. When I introduced the D&D game in 1974, there were only a few campaigns going. And the first year, we sold only slightly over 1,000 sets of rules. That was the first RPG, and we realized it would be a long struggle to assure the viability of the pioneer product. Game masters or players bent on creating and establishing their own RPG must be aware of the difficulties involved. There is an audience now, but there is also competition. Change is one thing, but development is another. It requires an expert game master to manage a change in the campaign. This applies even to a moderate alteration. For radical change to be accomplished smoothly and without radical alteration in the play group, both master players and expert game master are needed. Interestingly, the masterful GM will typically utilize the gradual change with moderate alterations in the campaign made permanent from time to time so as to bring about radical change eventually. Although they are not normally acceptable, these changes are necessary under such conditions. This process builds the player group's level of skill to expert, perhaps master, status or experience, contribution, and programmed development. Because there are so many game systems, detailed discussion of the process is not possible. The quantity of unknowns is so great that even examples would be applicable to too small a segment to be particularly useful. The possible combinations of existing games, combined conglomerates, or new approaches would require several thick volumes to cover. If the result of a campaign alteration is a new game, however, there is something concrete to say. Active dissemination of the new system should be undertaken as rapidly as possible. Players should be willing and able to begin their own campaigns and introduce new players to the game system. Use of the amateur press should be made. Professional journal publication would be helpful, of course, but in any event, care must be taken regarding trademark and copyright ownership. Exposure at enthusiast gatherings, club or association meetings, as well as regional or national conventions is a must. With all that, rules must be available to the newly created participants in the system and some form of assistance offered to the game masters running campaigns based upon it. If all this activity is successful, and if the game is based on a genre that has strong popular appeal, there is some chance that it will survive beyond a year or two. If 1 in 100 develop into commercially viable games, perhaps 1 in every 10 of those have a life of more than a couple of years. Well, say all the ambitious and creative GMs reading this, who cares about commercial success and long-term prospects? We're interested in providing the ultimate in role-playing games to our players. If it all ends in a year or two, that's a long time. Think of the enjoyment all of us will have in the meantime. Right on, say I. The reason for the existence of any RPG is to provide fun, and there is no guarantee that enjoyment will be gained over an ongoing period of longer than a year or two anyway, so go for it. When you do, though, be sure that you keep as many doors open as possible. If you and your fellow enthusiasts are bent on the creation of your own rule system, then here is what masterful folk should do to help assure the potential for long-term viability without sacrificing their own creativity and desire for the new game system. There are many possible combinations of composition of the new game campaign, but they fall into 4 general groupings. The 4 categories are: existing game modified by no more than 50% new rules material, more than 50% new systems utilizing an existing game as base, 2 or more existing games bridged by special rules, and unique systems. Categories 1, 2, and 3 indicate that the group has some affinity for 1 or more existing RPGs but find it or them unsatisfying in important play areas. We understand that humans are social and that role-playing games are an expression of this. Your group is a social entity unto itself. The enjoyment of the campaign play and the society of the members combine to bring more enjoyment than would be possible without these two elements. It is also understood that socialization outside the group, which combines one or both of the elements that bring enjoyment to the group, can bring additional enjoyment both while it occurs and afterward through some increased dynamism within the basic group. Therefore, it should be viewed as desirable to maintain the potential for maximum socialization outside the play group. This is accomplished by correspondence, publications, conventions, tournaments, and similar activities that bring enthusiasts into contact with others of like mind. To maintain maximum potential for the new game, it is desirable to retain contact with the participants in the existing game or games by keeping abreast of new developments specifically geared toward those games. Modification of an existing RPG to suit the campaign group's desire leaves a good opportunity for continuing association with the base game. If the modifications are not too extensive, not more than 50% of the whole, or too radical, changing systems of rules, for instance, but retaining the body of information used to play, then the Renegade group can keep in touch with the base game without undue difficulty. Typical areas of variance from the base game norm, such as character creation and the combat system, are the easiest to deal with in a way so as to allow the difference to remain without removing the campaign from the realm of the base game. To stay in touch with the base game or revising the character creation system, for instance, all you need to do is keep a parallel record of PCs the way they would be described in the original system, and then keep your hand in the base game by occasionally playing those PCs in a non-variant campaign. Whether a variant combat system is more detailed, likely, or less complicated, unlikely, than the original, it is a simple matter to keep sight of the original system by occasionally running non-variant combat situations. Radical rule alterations are such that there is great difficulty retaining touch with the majority of role-playing gamers on a meaningful basis. Changes of more than 50% of the base game system are radical in this respect. However, the fact that not all of the original system has been discarded indicates some remaining affinity for the original design. Although play within the original system will be difficult after becoming used to the radically altered game campaign, it is a good idea. That is, the group, GM and players alike, should periodically engage in play of the base system. This play should be fairly frequent, once a month at the least, and either as a group or with some other group or groups. Contact with the mainstream is thus maintained, and new ideas within the base system will be learned and understood in this manner. Such activity can only improve the level of mastery of all parties concerned. Additionally, it will help expose others to the variant systems, whether only through discussion or through play by invitation. The intermingling of two or more game systems with bridging rules to accommodate the mixture is a fairly common occurrence. Considering the imaginative capacity of most RPG enthusiasts and their active mentalities, keen interest in two or more game genres is hardly surprising. The campaign that has a multi-game basis is usually not in danger of becoming isolated, for the participants are likely to engage and play in any reasonably good campaign outside the group's own. There is some danger that the overworked GM will not have an opportunity to be as active outside the variant campaign as will his players. If you are such a game master, it is up to you to see that this doesn't happen. If you know such an individual, encourage him to remain active in the mainstream activities. Only very experienced and solid play groups with mature individuals should pursue the play of unique systems, unless the group is certain that the new game will be accepted by other gamers as a basis for their campaigns. Experience is necessary to manage the difficulties that are sure to arise as weak areas and anomalies within the system become evident during play. Solid refers to the association and friendship within the group. Members must desire to meet and play regularly, and then must be friends, for they will have little or no contact with other role-playing gamers in most instances because their game campaign will isolate them. Finally, the group members should be mature, for if they are not, change of residence, entrance into or graduation from college, new jobs, and marriage will soon cause the membership to dwindle. Recruiting new members will be difficult because of the unique nature of the game activity. In any event, it is urged that the group stay in contact with the gaming community through occasional play in other standard campaigns. The time has come. Your group is restless. Despite the excellent nature of the game upon which you based your campaign and the efforts put forth to assure challenge and excitement, the players have been active in the campaign for 3 years, let's say, and they are desirous of something new. They look to you as their GM to assist them in their quest. As a master, you will not only facilitate the group's expressed desire, but you will seek to do so in a manner that assists everyone in continuing his enjoyable pursuit while remaining within the gaming community and continuing to progress toward mastery. How do you manage all that? As a game master, such demand should be second nature and accomplished with a minimum of difficulty. Of course, the group is composed of individuals, and there are as many opinions as there are members, yourself included. Although you have the advantage of being the one who must do the initial work, you are aware that the result must be accepted by the balance of the group, or else players will desert the campaign. Therefore, you consider the 4 major methods of developing a new, non-standard campaign. Obviously, modification of the campaign won't do for the long term, and using it as a base with essentially new systems is also likely to bring dissatisfaction. Were this not the case, the campaign change would not be desired by the group. You know the problems inherent in a whole new game system. The logical course, then, is to bring several game systems with a diversity of genres into play by bridging rules. There will be some concurrence regarding the new genres desired. For the sake of this exposition, let's assume there are 2 subgroups with diverse wishes. One wishes to move the campaign from its base system genre, science fiction, into that of horror and the occult. The other is desirous of utilizing the post-Holocaust genre to provide the play vehicle. How can both be accommodated? The answer is to retain the base system. Bring in a new factor, let's say time travel in this case. The PCs, not the associated assistants or lesser PCs of the same players, are recruited by the Time Travel Authority to serve as agents. Bridging rules for the characters to match the new base system specifications are devised. Rules for certain limited equipment carried from one genre to the other are likewise prepared. An episode or saga is devised for each of the new games, and the whole campaign has been altered without loss of anything, except sleep for the GM, who must be responsible for the work needed to bring it all about. To counter the demands, the masterful game master might have the player who supported the new genres most vocally become the arbiter for play within the system in question, while reserving as his domain the overall campaign and possibly a subgenre as well. The blessing of role-playing games is that each campaign can be molded and shaped to suit the aims and preferences of a particular group. In fact, each campaign is by its nature distinctly different from all others, even those predicated on the same set of rules. But too much of a good thing, in this case an overdose of alterations heaped on the rule framework, can destroy all the work that the author of the game and the GM of the campaign have put in. Before a GM can know how much reconstruction his campaign can stand, he must understand and appreciate the basic structure of the game he's using. Which parts of the construction cry out for reinforcement? Which ones are fine just as they are? Which ones can be replaced without destroying the whole? If a remodeler rips all the beams out of a wall before shoring up the ceiling, he's asking for trouble. Likewise, a GM who tears out the underpinnings of a game system without realizing how many other things that structure is supporting will wind up with a mess that may not be able to be repaired. But a GM who proceeds with his remodeling in deliberate fashion, with a goal in mind and a plan at hand, stands a good chance of constructing a house that is the envy of the entire RPG neighborhood. And that is what Gary had to say in Chapter 5 about rules systems. So a few big thoughts came to me from reading this part of Chapter 5. When it comes to altering game systems or coming up with new ones, I encourage you to take a look at what the game system as written has to offer and then make the decision of whether that's something you want to do or not. Especially in this day and age, there are so many game systems tailored to all kinds of different weird niches, you may not have to reinvent anything. And in my On Guard review episode, where I talked about all the rule add-ons that me and my friend Pat and others have come up with, we identified what is the game design for On Guard to begin with, and then all the alterations we desired to make to it did not change any of those core mechanics, instead just sat alongside them and operated under the same simple, flat DM list. The dice tell you what the chart says, and that's what you have to live with. Results, no take back, saving throws, this and that and the other. And so these alterations operate just fine with the system as designed. Simple, flat, and uncomplicated. We didn't add depth, we added breadth. So the same mechanics you used in the core game, you use them in these new areas as well. And it works great. But as I frequently discuss with 5e aficionados, is that 5e, the fantasy superhero characters that allow you to effectively play a single player video game at a table with a bunch of other people, does not appeal to me. I want challenge. And so yes, I could change this rule, that rule, this rule, that rule, but in doing so, one, I'm violating the spirit that the rules of 5e and 5th edition were set up for. And two, at a certain point, am I even playing that game? And then I tack on 3, there are already systems that do what I want, I should just play them. And then the other big thing that stuck out to me, talking about every GM with ambition and a big imagination deciding to publish their own game system. You know who you are. I love y'all and I love your creativity, but Gary gave it to you straight. You've got very little chance of making it anywhere with your one-man band approach of the ultimate RPG ever, which is just a lightly reskinned version of an existing Dungeons and Dragons system. It's your home rules. You don't need a whole game for your home rules. Now I get it, some of y'all make bank off of it and some of y'all are hoping to do it, but you're further balkanizing a very small hobby. And the appeal of all these micro-differentiated rule sets appeal to an even smaller subset of that audience. So I say, rather than take your creativity and go hoe an untilled field full of rocks and difficulty that you probably have no idea how to handle and are foredoomed to failure should you try it, work with those who have some success and who know what to do with that success. Because my current favorite D&D-esque game system, it doesn't look like the core publisher of it really knows how to market or to work with third parties to do the kind of broad coalition building that is necessary to compete with Wizards of the Coast. Now, I have no idea what their sales numbers are. Maybe they're doing fantastic, but that's information I'm not privy to. But it doesn't look like they're dominating the genre, and in looking at con schedules, at best I'll see 1 or 2 game sessions being offered for this game, which has been around for quite some time. But a newer D&D alternative, my program observer was looking into it, Shadow Dark, and he sees all kinds of wonderful things happening with it. That the game head, Kelsey Dion, and whoever she's working with, appears to be synergizing with other creators, giving them support, giving them a platform, and the chatter appears to belong to them. And at any con that I'm interested in going to, there's at least 5 or 6 sessions scheduled for that game, and frankly, they're pretty appealing to me. Now, I haven't read the system yet, but my program observer says we might have to go that way. But just at first blush, it seems like that experience is designed to appeal to me. Now, I know that's just a reskin of 5e, but rather than Stephen Clements coming up with the ultimate 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons that's hardcore and gritty and blah, 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 of my own, that will be doomed to failure and waste most of my time and effort just trying to get it made, marketed, and for anyone to click on a video about it. If I can work with an established success, that is what I'm trying to do, basically, I should do that. Rein in your enthusiasm and direct them in more productive areas. That's what I say. What do you say? What do you think? Am I full of crap? Is Shadow Dark garbage? Is your 47th reskin of White Box D&D the ultimate experience and I just don't know? Let me know in the comments. And let me know what you thought about the rest of this chapter. I appreciate your time and spending your attention listening to me read Gary. And so, my dear friends, that's all I got for now. Until next time, I wish you nothing but the best.